Hello. I heard an awesome podcast today. The podcast number 128, Religion and the Placebo Effect, with Dr. Andy Thompson. And this is an awesome video because Dr. Thompson gets into morality and where it comes from, and the fact that they can now show that morality appears in children as young as 3 months old. So Christians who like to throw out that little, well, where does your morality come from if it doesn't come from God thing, you could refer them to this podcast 128. They could take a listen. It starts at about 40 minutes in, and I have basically just with my crappy computer, I've managed to just put the little segment where he's talking about the baby's morality information. It's a little bit broken up because my computer is barely, the only reason it's showing this video at all is because I think it's just sound. It's not really, I don't know, but you can understand what he's saying. It's clear enough that you can understand what he's saying. It's really cool. And you can also get references from what he's saying to other places where you can go check out the kind of science that he's talking about and read for yourself what they've discovered about how morality is a natural thing, and it starts occurring in children as young as 3 months old. 3 months old children have not read the Bible. They have no understanding of a deity, no more than my cat does, and yet they display morality, which doesn't surprise me because my cats display morality. I don't know why Christians seem to think that this is a really complicated thing that you cannot have unless you believe what they believe, But this is a way to say, you know what, you're wrong. I get my morality from evolution, and here's why. We have scientifically proven now that morality comes not from the Bible, not from God, from nature. So I'm going to play the clip, and you can listen yourself. And the whole podcast is awesome, so I recommend you go check out the Thinking Atheist podcast number 28 with Seth Andrews and Andy Thompson. Thanks.
Do you believe in an objective morality?
Yes, I think we can study morality scientifically. I think that's the thrust of, for instance, Sam Harris's book. He caught a lot of grief for it. I think he was right. I think you can study our moral inferential systems now in ways undreamed of when I was a medical student. You have the beautiful neuroimaging studies done when people are taking the famous trolley test, for instance. And if people are interested in this, I actually gave a talk on this at AAI in 2009. It's on the web. It's called From Heavens or From Nature. It's got morality in the title. And in that talk, you can pick up all the references and the basic ideas.
Look, if someone comes to me who is a believer and they say they get their morality from a deity or a holy book, and they say, well, Seth, how do you know that murder's wrong? What keeps you, well, how do you know rape and theft is wrong? And if someone comes to you with those questions, where do your morals come from? How do you respond?
Oh, there's just so many great ways to respond now, Seth. You can say, I got that morality from evolution. My morality is part of my brain. My morality is a basic animal morality that evolved in social species. We're a social species. Morality and our moral inferential systems are mechanisms that we have to help regulate group living. And you can refer them to what I think is some of the most extraordinary recent research that I just love, is you can now show these moral inferential systems coming online in 3 and 6 month old infants. Anybody interested in this, Google The Moral Life of Babies, Paul Bloom, great article in the New York Times Magazine. that summarizes this research that's being done at the Yale Child Study Center. Also, while I'm giving references here, Steve Pinker has a nice essay called The Moral Instinct in the New York Times Magazine, and it'll give you an introduction to this new science of morality. But let me get back to the children, because it's just fabulous stuff. And it was so important that when the first papers came out, they were published in Nature, the most important scientific journal. And you can take like 6-month-old infants, and anybody who's been around an infant knows how immature a 6-month-old infant is. They're sitting on their mother's lap and they watch a puppet show. And a puppet helps another puppet up a mountain. That's the helper puppet. There's another puppet called the hinderer puppet. And when the puppet is trying to go up the mountain, the hinderer puppet knocks it off the mountain. You show the puppets to the 6-month-old infant, it will orient towards and try to reach for the helper puppet. Now, you might say, so what's the big deal? It's huge. Basically, a 6-month-old infant is making a sophisticated social judgment about agents who are interacting, who they've never seen before. Infant has never seen them before. The interaction between these agents has nothing to do with the infant. They're just observing it. And they can make a judgment about that behavior. They distinguish and try to orient towards the helper puppet. Now, you might say, okay, well, this is a child that's just reaching towards the nice puppet. Here's where it really gets wild. And not wild, but just beautiful. Beautiful science. If another puppet punishes the hinderer puppet, so aggression, nastiness is being used in the service of punishing, the child will orient towards the punisher. So the child is making a distinction about a good and bad act and also the bad person being punished. And these are pre-verbal infants. And I think they've been able to tease it out, if my memory's correct, in infants as young as 3 months of age. But the stuff in the New York Times Magazine article, I think, will introduce anybody to it. And if you go to their websites, Paul Bloom, Karen Wynn, his wife, I think is the principal researcher, and another woman who was at Yale, Kylie Hamlin, who's now at University of British Columbia. And some of the videos, I think, are now posted of the puppet show. So you can see the evidence for yourself. But their discoveries were so important, they were published in Nature when they first came out. And so you can tell people that our moral inferential systems, our moral ability comes from evolution, it comes from our animal nature, it comes from our nature.
Conversation with anybody, look, you're in the medical field. You're a scientist. You're a champion of medicine, science, and you believe in fairies or whatever it happens to be.
It's fascinating. There's an intellectual part of me that understands how their minds do that. I think I understand better the mechanisms by which even a scientifically educated mind can get suckered into a religious belief. So there's an intellectual part of me that understands, but there's an emotional part of me that just doesn't quite, it has exactly your reaction to stuff. It's like, how the hell can you believe that stuff? I mean, you're a scientist, you're a medical scientist, how can you put up with that nonsense for a moment? And particularly anybody who's a physician. I mean, I was never much of a believer, but I tell you, I mean, medical school is what, if there was any remnant of religious belief, I mean, watching children die will do it to you. That's what I don't understand, how any pediatrician can be religious.
You know, Dan Barker once said, if you want, in his mind, proof there is no God, just walk into any children's hospital.
Absolutely. One of the best, if not the best arguments I've heard is that moment in Sam Harris's debate at Notre Dame against, what's that guy's name?
Is it William Lane Craig's debate?
Yes. Somebody pulled out the piece from the debate and put it up as a standalone 5-minute YouTube piece.
Okay.
Just fabulous.
Okay.
The whole debate is fabulous if you've not seen it. But in that debate, Sam Harris says 9 million children under the age of 5 die every year. That is 24,000 a day. That's 1,000 an hour. As we talk these few sentences, a couple of children, the very definition of innocence, are going to die. They're probably going to die in their parents' arms, who will be beseeching some God. And then he goes on to talk about how most of those parents are probably non-Christian, and who the Christian world sees as going to hell. It is one of the best pieces of any debate I've ever seen. But that speaks to exactly what Dan Barker said. How can you believe in God walking into a children's hospital?
Let's finish here with a quick slug on your book, because I just want to, okay? Why We Believe in God's a concise guide to the science of faith. And the book gets into what? I mean, are you taking a look at different regions of the brain and activity that happens? Are you talking about conditioning from your family and culture?
It's just basically what Claire Aquifer, my co-author, and I tried to do was to give a summary of this psychological science of religious belief. So in other words, if you read the book, which should take an hour and a half to 2 hours, at the end of reading the book, you can hopefully turn around and tell somebody else the mechanisms by which human minds generate religious belief. Basically, the fundamentals of the psychological science of religious belief. How and why minds generate religious belief, and how rituals harness our brains and brain chemistry to intensify and secure those beliefs. And it was written so that a smart, interested high school student or an 80-year-old who was interested could pick up the book, no scientific background, no knowledge of psychology, no knowledge of brain anatomy or cognitive neuroscience. It's written just as an introduction, because it's sort of like Darwin's idea. You don't have to be a scientist to understand natural selection. You don't have to be a biologist to know about natural selection and how it works. Similarly, you don't have to be a scientist to know how the human mind generates religious belief, because the human mind does it using everyday, ordinary social mechanisms that we use all the time, that you and I have been using as we communicate.